Hello everybody, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is a video tutorial to use the 6 degree of freedom panner MIDI with a logic session and a Reaper session with some ambisonic decoding plugins to show rotation, while the logic session focuses mainly on position and some spatialization parameters. So this video will be based on the presets that I have done, provided with when you download this patch. And we'll go through them. These first 6 presets are for the logic portion of the tutorial with the logic session. And the last 2 will be with the Reaper session, the Harpex plugin. Okay, so a few things before, although most of them are written in the README file at the depository website at GitHub. But it is important to know that you need specific drivers for both the space mouse and for the leap motion in order to work. It will all be specified in the README file. So that is very important. Okay, so this preset has 4 sections. This patch, the leap motion and space mouse common parameters that they share while in a certain configuration. The space mouse only section, the leap motion section, which is divided by the dominant hand, and the non-dominant hand, which we'll be explaining soon. I leave the patches open here for anything. For example, if you need to know if the leap motion is on or not. The preset also takes care of turning it on. But you can get in there as well if you need to customize the patch. Maybe you need to use some of the buttons that I don't necessarily use for this demo. Okay, so preset 1 uses it's for position of a 3D object in Cartesian, meaning XYZ, meaning left, right, front, back, and up, down movements, both from this space mouse and the leap motion. So when we press preset 1, everything comes to life. They're all, basically, this part is the most important one. So it should start working. Now, for some reason, the logic preset needs to sort of catch up with the values or something, but it might take a bit of movements in order for it to work. So we'll start with the relative mode. So relative needs feedback from the logic session. So perhaps at the end of this tutorial, I will show why you need to download this particular logic session, because it has in the environment page a setup where we get feedback from logic, which is very, very important in order to, when we're starting to use automation for these parameters, and it's just in general a better use. Okay, so as you can see, this is set up for the dominant hand on the leap motion and for the space mouse. So the space mouse basically just start using it. So left, right, as you can see, it doesn't move, but it perceives the movement of the spring that it has inside, and that's what I've mapped. I programmed in order to put out these MIDI CCs, which had been set up in MIDI Learn in Logic, and that's why this works. Now let's do it with the leap motion. So the first and easiest way to operate, I'm a right-handed, so I'll put it on the dominant hand, but I can also quickly show that you can just switch to left hand. So the easiest way to For relative, in order to relative to work, we need a clutch. We need something to make it, because you don't really touch anything while using the leap motion because you just use your hands. We'll use the Z button in order to enable it. Yeah, so we'll use that as the clutch, which means nothing will happen if I put my hand on top until I press Z, and then I can start using it. Yeah, so front, back is still. There he goes. Yes, I said for some reason you have to sort of force it, but once it's there. So notice that it doesn't matter where my hand is, it's just from there the displacement, right? So that's what makes relative very, well, not necessarily simple, but very intuitive way of using it also with the trajectories that I will demonstrate in a second. So that is the relative use on the dominant hand. So if I'm left-handed, I would just switch here to dominant hand. I'm going to switch this guy a little bit more. Press Z, and then like nothing ever happened. Now we can use the left hand, and you can see I'm a little bit more clumsy with the left hand. It has its range, so low range, big movements mean small movements in the MIDI CCs, and on the other hand, small movements once you start getting. Yeah, sorry about the sort of stutter in the panning. That's just because of the video on the computer. But when you do it at home, it's silky smooth. Okay, preset 2 is the same as preset 1, except that now we'll be in absolute mode, and then we'll have preset 3 in absolute gated. So the only difference with them is that in absolute, well, you just put the hand on top and it starts tracking. This, however, means that the position of your hand will always determine the position of the object in front of you. And, well, so if you want to stop using it, you just take your hand off. But, yeah, so this could be just for very free movement. You press it and let it go. Preset 3, however, I feel like it has a bit more of utility. So it's gated. It uses the same Z that we use for the relative clutch. So, for example, I can sort of dance around, do like little snapshots, which, if you're manipulating 3D objects of sound, it can get interesting. Or also you can just leave the Z button on and use it that way. But as you can see, I have a little bit more trouble because you kind of have to start memorizing the actual position of your hand. So one thing about the Space Mouse is that it is always relative mode. So if you want to use it, that's preset 1. One thing that I forgot to mention is that it uses audio rate for its signal. So I recommend to use your MacBook or your laptop audio system for it, not the one that you use, for example, for Logic. Not your audio interface, your Pro Audio interface. Use the one that comes with the laptop. I've found that that's the most successful way. Okay, preset 4 uses both hands. So if we are right-handed, our non-dominant hand is the left, and vice versa. If we're left-handed, our non-dominant hand is the right. So it will just adjust accordingly to this. It doesn't mean that this one will be used by the left-handed. That's just for the right-handed people in this session. As you saw with earlier I switched to left and I would still be controlling the dominant hand object, let's call it. So when we use two hands for the leap motion, we need, at least in relative, we need something to tell us for the clutch. But we can't use a button because we would need the other hand to do that. So we have a couple of options. One of them is a foot clutch. So I have it here set up from my little MIDI controller. And you can pick where your foot clutch, your sustain pedal mainly, will come from, and which CC will come from. So this comes from the Oxygen 25 MIDI driver. It's a 64, and I have a little LED here to tell you that it is coming in. So we'll use the foot clutch for both hands mode. So both hands mode will give a clutch signal to both hands, and both hands in this preset are already set up for position. So now I will be able to use both hands. As I said, it takes a second for Logic to sort of, yeah, get it. All right, so now, again, extremely laggy, but that's just because of the recording and the strain on the CPU. But without the zoom and the recording, it actually is pretty smooth. So hopefully my computer won't break, but we can try and record something. So you can see that even with this high level of sophisticated control system with both hands and 3 degrees of freedom each, you can still get something done. So I am going to say play over here. And since I'm no longer using the keyboard for the foot clutch, I will stay here, and you will see some nice, pretty objects flying around. And it will get recorded. All right, I will stop it. And we can see that there's automation that was recorded. And since we're in relative mode, actually doing a punch-in, at least, well, we're in latch, but I will do some punch-in automation to hopefully show you that it doesn't matter where your hands are, it will just catch up. So I will just press play, and it should just start to go, and look at him go, flying around. And then I'm like, whoops, that's not what I wanted for my left hand, so I'll just grab it and move it around. Actually, it didn't kind of work first, but then it did. I can just let it go, and let's say that that's where I want it, and then I can just grab the right hand and also take over from there. Let's see. So this is where I took over. Okay, last on this preset, you can also use what's called the pinch gesture, pinch aperture. So the aperture of a pinch gesture with either of both of your hands, it's possible. You can control something. So for example, here I will turn them on for both hands, and I will also say that the foot clutch will be done with the pinch aperture here. So I can control them in 3D, but also the aperture is controlling what, here's the size. So the size, each one has its own control. So the right hand or the dominant hand has a small size right now, and vice versa, and now I can switch it, right? Or control one, be modulating it in time over here while also supposedly moving. Well, it is MIDI, so it does at some point get stuck a little bit, but it is possible. Also, instead of a foot clutch, you can also use the pinch gesture for the position. So it was actually on, should have been off, sorry about that. But so the pinch now is the clutch. That's why it's called the pinch clutch over here in both hands. And we're using it for position. In the Harpex Reaper portion of the tutorial, we'll use it for the rotation. But for now, also I could just be looking at Logic over here, and let's do another punch in. So it'll start moving by its own, and then I'm like, no, the left one, actually, I'll take over. I am. And now the right one, I'm taking over and making them dance, blah, blah, and letting them go while when I unpinch. And we can see it actually got recorded, sorry, over here. And in latch, well, it will stay that way, right? Okay. So that's both hands. And you can use combinations, obviously, here and there. And then okay, now preset 5 is also position, but now in polar coordinates, so azimuth and elevation and distance. Well, we'll keep distance separate for now, to use it with the binaural object, or binaural panner, it's called in the Logic, that uses this, they call it angle, but it's azimuth and elevation for it, but it does not use really distance. So, same thing as before, we'll start with absolute, and then preset 6, 7 will go through those modes. So in absolute, the hand will just pick it up. It's free roam, as so to speak. So that's how you control it. You have to sort of imagine that you have a dome here in front of you when you're using the leap motion. And preset 8 will talk about how to use the space mouse in this mode. So let's go to preset 6, which is the same thing except absolute gated. So in absolute gated, same thing. It's the absolute position of this virtual dome that we have on top. But as you can see, it is controlled by the Z gate or by any other gate that we've been presenting here, such as the pinch clutch or with the foot controller. So here, for example, I'll use it with the Z button, and so also for doing this kind of snap sort of strobe, like for the position, or if you keep it on, and obviously it should work. If you're left-handed, it should be exactly the same. So let's go over here. I am not left-handed, so it might be harder to see. Maybe it's better at the beginning to use a low range, right? So that'll give you a bigger dome, so to speak. So I'm gonna have to go back to my right hand. All right, let's try it again. Yeah, so this is a little bit easier to control because the range is bigger, so larger movements are needed. And lastly, preset number 7 is on relative mode. So here is the only one that I would say, I'm not sure if it's easier. When we were using Cartesian and XYZ, definitely it's easier to control. But in azimuth and elevation, not necessarily, because you have to keep imagining this dome. So for example, if you start over here, then you have to imagine that the dome goes this way and so on and so forth. Let's just to exemplify, for example, we can put, it's the dominant hand that we're using. So if I turn on the foot clutch for the position, I will use the sustain pedal that's going to my oxygen 25 as the clutch, right? So here we go, we're navigating, or we can use the pinch clutch. So whenever I pinch the hand, hopefully you're seeing that in the camera feed, it will do that. Maybe here, actually, I do need a range a little bit bigger. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that's preset number 7. Preset number 8 is for the Space Mouse. Since for the Space Mouse, there's one way that I proposed to use, which is using the yaw, which is the dial motion of the that it perceives. It's called the yaw, the rotation on the z-axis. And it's still using the z for the elevation. So let's, oh yeah, we have to turn on the audio driver, the audio for the audio signal to help out. So here we go. I am, oh, whoa, we definitely need a slower range for this one. Yeah, but actually it's very smooth, very, very smooth to control azimuth because it's the same motion, right? It's going around, and that's what you're doing with the yaw. I don't have it endless here. It does stop at minus 180, but still very, very, you don't even have to mute, for example, the elevation when you're doing azimuth, and you don't have to mute the azimuth while doing the elevation, because they're very separate movements. That's why that works. So that's preset 8. Before we move on to the Reaper with Harpex part of the tutorial, I just wanted to show that in the environment of this specific logic session, the feedback that I had to get from those specific tracks that have these panners, these Atmos objects in these 2 cases, and the binaural panner here that works in with azimuth and elevation. And so the information is coming from those tracks from the mixer here. They're connected to these sort of monitoring windows, and then some transformation happens to make them back into MIDI messages, and so it comes back here to the MIDI in portion of the patch in order for relative control to work, because relative control needs this information back. So for example, here that we're using the yaw and the z-axis to control elevation, it knows that it's going to take it up from that point because of this value. So that's what's making it work. So in order for relative mode to work, we need these setups from the DAWs or Logic or Reaper. Those are the 2 that I know that can do this to give us the feedback in order to work. Okay, we'll conclude the tutorial video with presets 5, 6, and 7. 9, 10, 11. To demonstrate the rotation part of these 6 degrees of freedom devices. So preset number 9 starts with the position. As you can see, they're all off, and the rotation CCs are on. And we have, over here, the rotation in absolute mode. So that means I'm going to be using my dominant hand, which is the right, to control this. These plugins also rotation, same parameters, pitch, yaw, and roll over here. So that is absolute. So absolute in rotations even less intuitive than translation position, because It's fixed in one inclination, one orientation, and it's very hard to understand what's going on. Then we have it on absolute gated. So I'll start with the simple pressing of X in the keyboard in order to open it up. I can bring down the range a little bit so you can see. Okay, this one is a little bit more intuitive. So I'm actually, it makes sense when I'm doing a certain movement. I do see it reflected. But the best one is in preset 11, which is the relative way. So you can do it with X, but you can also do it with the other two clutch modes that we've been seeing. For example, the pinch clutch. So I'll just grab it. I'll just pinch, and when I pinch, so the good thing about relative, I'll bring it down, the range, is that it's very intuitive. You don't have to know. I'm always trying to put it back to the reset position. That's a really good test that it's intuitive if you can actually try to successfully put it right in the middle. But obviously, it's very intuitive. That's some roll. This is some pitch action and some yaw. There we go. Right? If I need to keep going, I just unpinch, pinch, and keep going, unpinch, pinch. Just like what you do in the mouse, in a way, if you run out of space in your pad. And lastly here, I didn't do a preset, but you can do both hands. So you can put this, let's say the foot clutch, on both hands mode, and then finally we'll do it with a pinch. But we can start here, and I'll try to do both hands at the same time. So we have the non-dominant, which is the left hand for me, over here, and with the right one. So here the clutch obviously is working for both objects. But we can also, instead of use the foot controller, we can use the pinch clutch for each one. So here I'm just controlling the left, and over here the right. Right, and you can just also record, and because it's in relative, it will just catch up where the automation is, and you can just punch in some automations from there. Yeah, even the left hand, I was able to sort of bring it back to the reset position. Okay, finally, we can talk a little bit about the Reaper session. It's easier than Logic in that sense, where the only thing that you need to do, well, I'm not going to explain it. You can open it up, but it basically, you need a MIDI out channel that its routing options are like this, that it has a MIDI hardware output to max to send back that information, and in the plugin tracks, you send it to that MIDI out, and you send no audio, and you send all MIDI. So that's it's pretty easy to do it over here in Reaper. And that with that, I conclude the tutorial video for the 6 Degree of Freedom Panner.